and welcome to Network Africa. I am Adeshewa Josh. Ugandans celebrate 53 years of independence today as many throng the venue of the parade in Gulu to commemorate the day. Nigeria's Vice President Yemi Osinbajo visits South Africa to inaugurate the nation's consulate in Pretoria. And Nigerian techie George Brown uses online platform to increase access to quality education. It's been 53 years since Uganda became a free state. The country gained independence from British rule in 1962, and like most African countries that gained independence in the 60s, Uganda has had its fair share of troubles. But all of these troubles, many Ugandans say, is worth the celebrations today. Some of them took to the streets in different parts of the country to remember this day, which the country became free. Some even went on Twitter to express their wishes for their beloved country. Even President Museveni was not left out. His Twitter handle says, quote, "Independence Day is a good time to remember who we are and how we got here. God bless Uganda. Happy Independence Day," end of quote. Well, there was also a parade at Gulu, and those pictures you're seeing, what happened today at Gulu during the parade? Well, Gulu, the venue of the parade, is quite apt because it is the only part of the country where the British Army experienced intense resistance in 1912 and could not conquer it. Joshua Poro, a Ugandan journalist, joins me now from Gulu. Well, thank you so much for joining me on Network Africa, Joshua Poro. Thank you. Well, you have been monitoring the independence celebration since morning. Tell us, how has it been? How did it go?
Well, of course, according to government organization, this has been immensely successful because there was an entire parade that has been going on since morning. And of course, the event did end at about 5:30 Ugandan time. That is 2 hours behind Nigerian time. And we had a dignitary visiting us from the neighboring Kenya. That is Kenyan Deputy President William Samoei Ruto, who did express the support of the Kenyan government towards the fulfillment of the missions of the National Resistance Movement, which is the ruling government in Uganda. And if you might have recalled, a couple of months ago, Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta was in Uganda, and they signed a pact for Uganda to distribute its sugar to Kenya. They also signed a pact about the standard gauge railway, where they have a railway coming in from Mombasa all the way to Uganda through to Juba. And they also agreed to construct an oil refinery in Hoima. So the Kenyan government did express their support and say that they will be ready and willing to support President Museveni and his ruling government in anything that he would further love to do. So those are the remarks that was made by Deputy President William Ruto when he came here. However, President Museveni did say something, and he said that the government of Uganda is now going to use a method of prioritization. He said the government cannot do everything at once. If revamp the health sector, revamp education at once. So he said the government will first concentrate on infrastructure development, that is building of the roads, and then later they will put a technical school in each sub-county. But he did not forget to talk about corruption. He said corruption is one of the reasons Uganda's infrastructure is not developed, because if I can only tell you, more than 50 billion shillings was embezzled from the Ministry of Works in the last 5 financial years.
Okay. Joshua, let me quickly ask you. We also understand that the opposition took to the social media, as you already heard in my intro, that some Ugandans were online today to celebrate the day, including President Museveni. Well, his opposition says that the poor style of governance in the country is weakening everything about your country. Is this the notion on ground by a lot of Ugandans?
Well, if you do realize, the ruling government always in every way tried to curtail the opposition, stop them from doing what they do best. Let me just give you an example. We have our Prime Minister, former Prime Minister John Patrick Amama Mbabazi, who left the ruling government and now wants to stand for presidency as an independent. They did not believe that the man could amass the amount of support he did. So when he went to one of the districts to campaign, he was tear-gassed, rubber bullets were fired in the air just because he had too much support. Of late, the ruling government tabled some bills in parliament. Now, let me tell you about these bills. One, The Electoral Commission, if you want to stand for presidency, you have to pay a nomination fees of 8 million Ugandan shillings. Okay? Now, if you pay 8 million Ugandan shillings, the Electoral Commission would in turn give you 20 million Ugandan shillings so that you can traverse the country, use that money, campaign to the masses, and at the end of the day, you are voted in for president if you are successful. However, in the latest electoral reforms, this was changed. How did this happen? So the electoral reforms was that the presidential candidates are no longer paying 8 million Ugandan shillings. They are now paying 20 million Ugandan shillings. On addition million Uganda shillings, they are not being given any money to go and campaign. In addition to that, the time for campaigns has been reduced. So that means presidential candidates cannot make it to traverse all the 112.
Okay. We are having technical issues hearing you, Joshua. I hope we can reconnect in the next couple of minutes and hear you out, because we would like to know what preparations are in place for the Ugandan elections, seeing that President, now we have Joshua Poro back. Thank you. Let me quickly ask you this question before we lose you again. Tell us about the elections next year. President Museveni has been the president since 1986. Will he run again? Are there opposition candidates? Tell us.
Well, of course, when you look at the 1995 Ugandan constitution, it was quite clear that presidents should only have 2 terms in power. But President Museveni did manipulate the... Well, President Museveni, he has, of course, been in power since 1986, and that is a common phenomenon for many African leaders. They did not want to leave power. But according to the Ugandan 1995 constitution, it was clear that all presidents should only have 2 terms in power. However, the ruling government, which is President Museveni's party, has a majority in parliament. So he was in position to manipulate the majority of his members in parliament to remove term limits. So that means he can go for as many terms as he wants. But however, there is one limitation. Presidents are not supposed to be beyond the age of 85. Right now, President Museveni is 71 years. So that means if he stands for elections in 2016, February, he will be 72 years. And yet we have 5-year terms. So that means that along the way, when he has 2 years to end his term, he will clock the age of 75. So there is just one option. He has to resign the presidency and move on. But being a very cunning man, I do think that before he even makes 75 years, he will again manipulate the parliament, and then they'll remove the age limits for the presidency, and then he can just rule and rule and rule on for life.
I'm going to have to let you go, Joshua Poro. Thank you so much for bringing us up to speed about the Uganda independence. We will keep an eye on the elections and see how it pans out. Thank you.
Welcome.